Migration has been one of the most toxic and divisive issues for the Commission of Jean-Claude Juncker over the last 5 years. And it's from the 12th floor of the Commission building in the heart of the EU quarter, where one Greek man had the responsibility of managing it. So before he packs up his bags and heads on to new ventures, we wanted to hear from the European Commissioner for Migration, Dimitris Avramopoulos. Remember back in 2014 when you were having your sort of job interview with the Parliament, you were saying that the migration agenda for Europe would be a crucial test, you said, for the legitimacy of Europe. Do you think the Commission has risen to that challenge?
We are not where we were 5 years ago, which proves that we delivered. Flows have gone down, our borders are better protected, we have set up new mechanisms, and we have beefed up the existing agencies like Europol and Frontex. Frontex right now is not at what it was before. Very difficult to convince 28 member states, first of all, to cooperate, and second, to trust each other, because this is one of the main problems of the European Union today.
And you mentioned the border security Frontex, of course, and the plan is in the 2020 budget, there's some over 100 million euros earmarked for that, for putting more policemen on the borders. Is that a bit of a fortress Europe? And is that a direct response to what the European governments want and their voters?
Europe should never become a fortress. I will remind you something. The very first time that this term was used was in the year 1933 by Hitler. We don't want this kind of Europe. But at the same time, we have to protect our borders. Right now, we are really in a crucial moment. Jean-Claude said 3 years ago that we are crossing existential moments. It is true. The rise of populism and nationalism, it's a big threat. They have gained ground.
And do you think that if the perception was there that the migration issue had been dealt with better, perhaps, or that better policies had been put in place, there wouldn't have been this swing to nationalist parties in the European elections like we saw this year in countries like here in Belgium, in Italy, in Poland,
you are in the office, as you said in the beginning, where the main initiatives were taken in the very beginning. We took everything into consideration. We wanted to provide the support to the frontline member states. And on the other hand, to prevent irregular arrivals in Central Europe. It was not easy, I have to confess, to put together all these different approaches because national policies still prevail. So on the one hand, we had the European policy that we are thinking and acting on behalf of all Europeans, and on the other hand, we are confronted with the hardliners of some countries. Here I would like to make a difference between member state and government. But governments should never forget that they come and go. But the states are there.
You lead me on nicely to Italy. Italy, of course, has a brand new government. New government means new policies. What mistakes do you think were made before with the government of Matteo Salvini when he was Interior Minister? And what do you foresee now with this new government?
It has to do with the domestic politics in Italy. I'm afraid that a large part of the Italians were convinced to all these very easy political slogans. With Salvini, I can tell you that at the end, I had started noticing a slight change. He started as an anti-European, and at the end, he started articulating a more friendly European political verb. Now, what's happening in Italy, it's up to the Italians to judge it.
Matteo Salvini is the same man who was criminalising NGOs and captains for saving lives at the sea. People like Carola Rackete, for example. Do you think that she's a hero or do you think that she's a criminal?
Well, I say that she was carrying out her duties, moral, based on principles. You must always pay respect to the ones who are doing their job, believing in principles. And I think that what happened there was also an incident that should never be repeated in the future.
And do you feel sometimes the response has been on a boat-by-boat case or crisis-by-crisis case?
I have repeatedly said that we need permanent mechanisms. I am pushing a lot on that. We cannot go like this in the future. All member states to understand that it is a moment to adopt a permanent mechanism. By saying so, I want to make a reference to our effort to adopt the so-called New Dublin, which is very important. I want to be frank with you. I was very much disappointed by the stance adopted by some governments. Some believe that it is a distant issue. It has to do with Southern Europe. No, it's not the case. What we try to do is adopt a strategy for all Europe.
And Ursula von der Leyen, the incoming Commission President, has vouched to reform Dublin. Is it mission impossible, though, do you think?
No mission is impossible unless we make it impossible. It is up to the new leadership of the European Commission to articulate a strong pro-European political verb and convince member states. I know it is not easy, but we are not here to do an easy job. European future will be put at stake if we do not manage to provide permanent solutions for migration.
And Commissioner Avramopoulos, a couple of years ago when Angela Merkel, or it could have been last year in fact, when Angela Merkel was speaking in the European Parliament, Nigel Farage stood up and thanked her for contributing to Brexit because of her open door policy. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you want me to make comments on Farage's comments?
Well, on the link between...
I would never do it because I believe that his role in Europe, and most importantly in his country, is a very negative role. And this is what the historian of the future will judge one day. Because in history, there are two types of politicians and leaders who are remembered. The ones who were there to build and the others who were there to destroy.
So we know how you feel about Nigel Farage. One final topic I wanted to touch on briefly was the EU-Turkey statement and the latest threats from Erdogan. What does this all mean now, do you think, for EU-Turkey relations?
I want to be against blunt. The EU-Turkey statement should remain alive. This cooperation should stay there and be deepened even more in the future. But on the other hand, this cooperation, in my eyes, shouldn't be used as a tool of pressure, as a negotiating tool.
Okay. Commissioner Avramopoulos, thank you so much for being our guest today on Global Conversation.
The pleasure of mine to be with you. Thanks.